In the debate between Alex O'Connor and David Wood earlier this year, the Christian debater David Wood brought up an interesting idea that not many Christians know about. It's called the two powers in heaven theory. Let's hear him explain it.
Here's the idea in a nutshell. The Old Testament is very clear that there's one true God. But there are numerous passages in the Old Testament where we see two divine figures. Sometimes God seems to be in two different places doing two different things. This is all over the place in the Old Testament, from Genesis all the way to the prophets. If you put all of the passages together, it seems like there's God you can't be around because his presence would destroy you, and God you can be around somehow. The God you can't be around is distinct from the God you can be around. They interact with each other. One sends the other, and yet they're both God.
We start to get the idea that there might be plurality in God's nature on the very first page of the Bible. In Genesis 1, we read how God says, "Let there be light, let the waters be gathered together," and so on throughout creation. But then God says, "Let us make man in our image." So somehow we have one God who can refer to himself as a we. Let's go further. Genesis 19, we read some interesting language about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Lord, Yahweh, rained fire from heaven out of Yahweh. Now it almost seems like we have two Yahwehs. But again, we know that the divine name only belongs to one God. Before Jesus came, this was a big mystery to the Jews, leading to the two powers in heaven idea. We'll build this more as we go. I'm now going to introduce a new character to the discussion, the angel of the Lord. This is not just an ordinary angel, as we're about to see. I'd also like to add that the Hebrew word for angel, malach, just means messenger. But anyways, when Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac, the angel of the Lord calls out to him and says, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know you fear God, because you have not withheld him from me." The angel of the Lord is definitely distinct from God the Father, but he says Abraham does not withhold his son from him. The angel of the Lord is no ordinary angel, because he identifies himself with God and does the things only God can do. As we'll see, this angel is Jesus. It is this angel that calls out to Moses from the burning bush, but it is this angel that tells Moses that he is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his name is I am who I am, Yahweh. Multiple times in Judges does the angel of the Lord appear, and after, the people say they saw God. This is strange because the Bible says no one can see God. So this is where we get the idea that there is a God you can see and a God you can't see, and both are Yahweh. If you want to find Jesus in the Old Testament, stay on the lookout for this angel of the Lord figure, because something very interesting is probably about to happen. Also be on the lookout whenever God is prophesying or making covenants. These are hotspots for finding divine plurality. For example, in Zechariah, God says, "And I will pour out on the house of David a spirit of grace, so that when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him." This should immediately stick out to you as being about Jesus. Finally, let's talk about Daniel 7. Daniel has a dream where one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven, he approached the Ancient of Days, God, and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him forever. The Ancient of Days is God, but this Son of Man also does the things only God can do, and received the worship due as only to God. This is where we finally bring things to the New Testament. At Jesus' trial, the high priest asks if Jesus is the Messiah, and he famously responds by quoting this Daniel 7 passage. After this, the high priest cries out that it was blasphemy. Why would the high priest cry blasphemy if Jesus didn't call himself divine? Saying you were the Messiah wasn't punishable by death, but calling yourself that second power in heaven certainly was. That's why they had him crucified, because he told them he was in the Old Testament, and he was Yahweh. Jesus is the connective thread that runs throughout the whole Bible. It becomes a whole new way to study the Bible. It gives us confidence that Trinitarian ideas and Jesus' divinity weren't made up by later Christians, but were present from the very beginning. And it shows us that the plan for our salvation was destined from the beginning. This revolutionary idea that Yahweh had come down and the Old Testament had talked about this man Jesus is why we're all here today. If you enjoyed, I'd appreciate a like or subscription, and if you didn't, keep the discussion going in the comments. I'll see you next time. And oh, by the way, live by the way.